Our, my name is Edgar Lopez, and I'm here with my partner in our group.
Kevin Lopez.
And we're here to interview a police officer, Jonathan.
Jonathan Kerber.
Which position in the police?
I'm a deputy sheriff.
Deputy sheriff. And we'd like to see, we'd like to shed light on basically of what happens on events. So, the first question, like, how do you feel of excessive force in the police force?
I was talking to you earlier about the excessive force, and it does occasionally happen. You do see it happen sometimes, and when it does happen, it gets reported, and obviously the person who uses that excessive force gets disciplined and properly trained on how to apply force. But in I haven't personally observed any excessive force on my department or with any of my partners. But again, what some people define as excessive force is different from others. On our department, it's pretty even across the board. We have a very specific standard and requirements for our force that define the force and what force can be used at what point.
Okay. Do you think that the media is unfair for the police?
I do think it's unfair. Well, I think the media likes to basically blow up a situation that is not what it seems to be. They take it the wrong direction. The media, in my opinion, is good, but it's also bad because you need something to keep agencies and law enforcement in check. You know what I mean? The fact that there is media that covers police use of force and sometimes covers it in a negative light. Well, often covers it in a negative light because that's what news is. That's what makes the money, and that's what are the popular stories, are the misuse of force.
Such as the Zimmerman, the kid from Georgia? Was it Georgia?
Well, you mean Zimmerman? He wasn't a police officer. He was actually a civilian, part of a neighborhood watch program. And again, in my opinion, the media on that was horrible. I think it was very, very bad. Here you have a citizen. Okay, so it's one thing you have if you have a trained police officer fighting. Even in this situation, based on the story, I wasn't there. I wasn't experiencing what Mr. Zimmerman was experiencing, but from what I recall is that he was on his back, and that was it Trayvon Martin was?
I think Trayvon.
Yeah, he was on top of him, mounted him, and was punching him in his head, in his face, and the back of his head was bouncing off the ground. Now, when that happens, and you have a gun on you, what do you think is going to happen when you pass out? And that kid finds that gun on you. You're a dead man, right? So for him to pull out the firearm and kill this kid, like I said, no one wants to kill someone. In this situation, I feel that if I were put in that situation, and that if someone was on top of me, punching me, and I felt myself like I'm going to pass out because I'm getting beat, I'm going to lethal force. I mean, that's what it is. I mean, there's a threat of great bodily injury or death. And the way that the media covered it was, this kid was minding his own business, and that he did nothing to Mr. Zimmerman to get shot. You know what I mean? So again, that's a situation where I personally didn't experience, so I really can't say exactly what I would have done or what would have happened or whether it was justified or not. But I mean, it went before a jury, and you know, they didn't find him guilty. So that doesn't mean he wasn't guilty again, you know. But it's a situation where you kind of have to think and put yourself there. And what would you do if someone was on top of you, who likes to fight and is punching you to the point that you feel like you're going to pass out? That could be one punch. One punch could make you feel like you're going to pass out. And if that's the case, there's a threat of great bodily injury or death. And for me, I'm going home to my family.
So what do you think goes through the mind of a police officer when you're in a position where they won't have to use excessive force?
Actually, you know what? I'll give you an example of a recent incident that I was in, where I ended up pepper spraying and tasing someone. So basically, this person was a homeless person, a little bit, or very much mentally ill. And it was in a kind of an upscale neighborhood, and he was walking down the sidewalk, and one of the citizens, you know, kind of indicated that they were uncomfortable with his presence, and I pulled up alongside him and, you know, identified myself, said hello. He said he didn't want to talk to me at that point. He wasn't breaking any laws or anything, or at that point, I didn't really see anything that indicated that he was extremely mentally ill. So I said, okay. He said he didn't want to talk to me, so I said, okay, and I kept going on my way. I went down to the end of the street and parked, at which point a security guard contacted me and said that this guy was a problem, that he had stolen some property from one of the residents a week prior, and that they didn't want him on the property. I told the security guard, I said, well, right now he's on a public sidewalk. He said he's only indicated that he didn't want to talk to me, and he's not breaking any laws, so there's really nothing I can do right now. So anyways, I stayed there at that spot and was just kind of, you know, just monitoring traffic in the area, and this person walked up and started walking onto the property, and I told him, hey, I said, hey buddy, you know, I don't think security wants you on their property. They're probably going to ask you to leave. And then he basically started yelling at me, F you, I don't have to listen to you, you're not the cops, this and that. And then he continued walking on the property, at which point the security guard said, hey, you can't come on the property. And then he started challenging the security guard to fight and said, screw you, I'm going to go where I want. So at this point, now you have a person challenging someone to fight, and they're trespassing on the property right in front of me. So, I mean, I have to take action, right? You know, you can't just let this guy, do that. So he was walking behind this complex. Okay, so I have options now. I could grab him and try and arrest him right then and there. Right now, at this point, it's just a property crime. He's just, I mean, there is a threat of violence, but he's now walking away from the security guard. So he's not really a risk, but I do know I'm gonna have to arrest him. But behind the complex, it makes me vulnerable, because as I'm putting out a request for backup, it's going to take them a while to find me because we're behind this complex. So I maintained a distance and followed this guy. He continued walking through this upscale condominium complex and back out onto the street, at which point you know, I put out my exact location so that responding units can come and back me up. So I maintained a distance as long as I can to allow other deputies to come and help me. That way, you know, with the more deputies you have, the less force you have to use because it's just overwhelming at one point where, you know, it's just, oh, I only have to hold one hand, you know, so you don't have to throw blows or anything to try and keep him from fighting you, you know, in a fight. Everyone just grabs a limb and restrains him. So he walks out on the street and then he starts walking towards a group of people. There's a moving van, there's some citizens, just people sitting on the park, people exercising, and he's walking, he's got his fist clenched, he's cussing to himself, he's angry, and you could tell he's just ready to fight the next person he comes across. So now, the situation just got escalated because I have to stop this guy before he hurts someone else. There's my safety I'm concerned about, but my job is to protect other people, okay? If your kid's out playing, you would expect that police officer to put himself in harm's way to stop that person from hurting that kid, right? That's the way I see it when I step up and have to use force and have to contact someone, risking my life and myself. I think of my own kids. I was like, well, if my own kids are in a situation where they're at risk, I expect that police officer to step up and do what he was sworn to do, and that's protect my kids. So in this situation, even though I had deputies responding, I didn't have time to wait because now he's walking towards people that he's going to likely injure or fight. So I identified myself as a police officer and I told him to stop, and at which point he said no. So I started with the least amount, which would be just a control hold, and I grabbed hold of his wrist, at which point he turned around and he punched my arm. So now this brings him from just an uncooperative category to basically to a assaultive. I mean, he just punched me. It's game on. So I could go to taser, I could go to baton. I still have a good amount of distance from me to the people, or from him to the people, and so as opposed to going straight to taser, because this guy, I could tell he's mentally ill. He's talking to himself, he's cussing, he doesn't understand that I'm a police officer. So with the mentally ill, again, you have to think about the flip side. What if this mentally ill person was your kid? Would you want this police officer to just go straight to the highest force that he's authorized to use? Or do you want him to do what he feels is reasonable, right? So at this point, my opinion was, okay, well, I've got a little bit of time. Let's try and pepper spray him and see if he complies. So I walk up beside him, I pepper spray him, and it just makes him angry. He kind of like shakes it off and continues. He starts to pick up his pace a little bit. I'm like, okay. And so now I grab both of his arms and I push him up against the gate, and he starts to struggle with me. I'm still avoiding, using the taser. But now at this point, he's got his arms in front of him. I'm behind him with his arms, and I don't know what he's doing with his hands. And I see him making movements. And I had the feeling that he was probably grabbing a weapon out of his pockets or waistband. So at that point, I had no choice. I had to escalate the force. So I pushed off him, drew my taser, and tased him. And immediately, it's called neuromuscular incapacitation. When you get a good taser spread, it basically locks up their body and they just kind of fall onto the ground. And it had an immediate effect on him, which was good. And as soon as the taser stopped, he complied. So you saw the levels of the escalating force there. And basically every time you use force, you have to stop and assess. It's going to be a split-second assessment of, do I have time? Where am I backup? What's my risk? What are the risks of other people? There's 1,000 things going through your head as you get put into a situation. So.
You said earlier how the 1% of applicants get accepted to be a police officer.
Uh-huh.
Do you think that within the years they start to abuse their power or use excessive force?
Well, I've been a police officer 8 years now, and I don't view force really any different than when I first became a police officer, other than the fact that now I recognize signs a lot better than I did before. That someone's about to fight me, or someone is about to, is about to do something that's going to cause me to have to use force. So, in terms of what I feel I can and can't do out in the field, or against someone who's going to fight, nothing's really changed. So, I don't see how that would change through an officer's career in terms of them abusing or wanting to overuse their power. Not to say that it doesn't happen. There's some police officers who maybe they get onto the department and they don't know how to use the power from the get-go. In my opinion, law enforcement, especially out here in California, is a very complex job, and you should have some college education in the law, and to understand the purpose of the law, the spirit of the law, as opposed to the letter of the law, and your purpose to being out there. I feel that when I go out into the streets to patrol, I feel that my job out there is to protect people, protect their property, and to provide solutions to problems. If you come across someone who's drunk in public, yeah, you can arrest them for being drunk in public, but will it also solve the problem if you call a relative to come pick them up? Are they going to be off the street now? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
Now, if it's an habitual problem where you're dealing with this same guy every single week, then yeah, the purpose of that law is to provide a punitive measure for their actions, where they'll be punished for it. But, everyone drinks every now and then, and people sometimes make the mistake of over drinking and are become intoxicated in a public place and are unable to take care of themselves. And sometimes your only mean is to arrest them. So and those arrests, because they're a danger to themselves or others, because of their intoxication, you have to take them off the street, and you have to use force necessary to take them off the street. So if they want to fight, then obviously you're going to have to use the appropriate force to take them into custody. So, again, like I said before, just to become a police officer, there's a lot of checks and balances that you have to go through, a lot of tests, polygraph tests, background. Even in the background investigation, they'll go door to door at your neighborhood and talk to neighbors. Say, hey, what do you think of Johnny? Do you think he's a good kid? Do you think he would be a good police officer? Even if you're from New York, they'll fly background investigators to New York just to go door to door and knock on your neighbor's door to ask you what kind of person you are, because it's that important that we hire good people that want to do a good job and do the right thing. And yeah.
All right, then. Well, thank you for the interview, for us letting us interview you.
Absolutely.